One man can change the world with a bullet in the right place.
Welcome back to the New to Pew Podcast, episode 8, titled Gatekeepers and Key Masters. And before you ask yourself,
who the fuck is that guy?
I'm going to answer you. That is the one and only Bagman himself. What's happening, homie?
I love the intro. we got to use that every time because I pride myself on being one of the best kept secrets in the 2A community.
Silent.
So every time somebody,
the one and only.
Oh, nice.
So, okay. So, gatekeepers and key masters. What exactly is considered to be a gatekeeper in the 2A community?
You shall not pass!
So there's some people that are more interested in their own benefit and their own agenda than the actual advancement of your Second Amendment as a civil right. Whether that's profit or notoriety or whatever their reason for it is, these people are not necessarily allies, even though they are major influencers in the community. For example, we just had the Bruin decision come down, which basically strikes down justifiable need in the state of New Jersey, right? Basically says that every state is now going to be a shall issue state instead of a may issue state, and you can't put these unnecessary caveats on a person's civil right. Mm-hmm. Sounds awesome to me, but now we're wrapped around the axle on what the qualification portion of proving yourself capable with a firearm needs to be. And people came out of the woodwork saying, well, you need to take my class, you need to go through my certification, you need to go through my qualification, and they are charging exorbitant amounts of money for this. A qualification that takes 50 rounds to run and is a total of like 15 minutes should not cost $500-$600. That's chicanery. That's ridiculous. You know yourself, just a trip to the range, a box of ammo does not last that long. Sadly. You're not using that much of someone's time to run a qualification. So even if they're charging $100 an hour, it's $25, dude. It's not that hard. So, and then you still have to do all the other paperwork and fingerprinting and yada, yada, yada. Right. Mm-hmm. So for those people to get in the way and say, well, you know, now that you can get it, I'm the gatekeeper to that. And the only way to get it is now through me. Now that the government obstruction has been removed, why are they making themselves an obstruction? Another example would be manufacturers. So most recently, there was some sort of hearing where the owners from Sturm Ruger and Daniel Defense were testifying, and they were asked, would you advocate for abolishing the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which oversteps their boundaries and overregulates and creates determinations on firearm stuff all the time? So these two firearms manufacturers said no.
Traitor!
We take great pride in partnering with our oppressors and the people who seek to violate our rights. And Sturm Ruger in particular has a history of that. Bill Ruger was a big advocate for the original 94 assault weapons ban. He was on record as saying no one needs more than a 10-round magazine. That's part of where that BS came from. He was an old school FUD, right, where he thought the Second Amendment was about hunting. He had no problem manufacturing full capacity magazines for government agencies and the military, but he thought civilians should be limited for some reason. And it wasn't until he passed that Ruger started manufacturing higher capacity handguns, higher capacity rifle magazines. We got things like the BX25, a 25-round magazine for the Ruger 1022. So a little 22 rifle could finally have a full capacity magazine. Mm-hmm. And there's cases like that all over the place, where you find out these manufacturers have donated to anti-gun organizations or are in bed with politicians that are pushing for more regulation. And you have to ask yourself why. there's several things. One is it can limit your competition, right? If it gives you an unfair advantage in the marketplace, a corporation may favor that.
Okay.
You can run into personal ideologies not aligning, even though they're involved in the industry.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that one's hard to swallow since, well, I get it. Not everybody feels the same way about the same thing. So sure.
You've also got the reality that it always comes down to the bottom dollar, and they're going to do what they feel is best for them. And companies like Daniel Defense may feel like Colt has in the past, that they're better off just manufacturing for the government, and they would rather pursue those big government contracts than manufacture for the much larger civilian market. Colt's actually done that more than once in the company history, and both times it's backfired on them, where when that contract runs out, the company almost goes under.
Because they don't have the reoccurring income from the government contract?
Well. How the turntables...
Correct. And you can always lose a government contract. Those are up for bid, right? Colt doesn't have a current military contract for handguns at this point. They had the 1911. They were a big part of the manufacturing in the 1911, in my understanding. But when the Beretta 92 was adopted, Colt was out. They were manufacturing ARs. They were another one that was notorious in just rolling over and showing their belly with the assault weapons ban. They went so far as to develop a different type of lower for their AR pattern rifles that had what was called a large pin. So the front pivot pin on your AR receiver was a different size than a standard one. So that like the civilian ones...
You had to only buy their one to fit the pin kind of thing? Well,
yeah, the idea was that they were going to make your military uppers were no longer compatible with civilian lowers.
Was that done to block out the, I don't want to call them ghost guns, but the guns that were quote unquote hitting the streets, not really coming from gun stores? Because I'm sure we've all seen the movies where the one guy finds the military crate full of guns and the military weapons hit the streets. Was that to try to prevent that from happening?
I don't know, because if a military weapon hits the streets, it's probably complete. It's not just the upper that hits the street and then you're going to use a civilian lower and piece it together. You probably scored the whole machine gun out of the Punisher van.
Oh, you're right. And when you're right, you're right. And you're always right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
The arguments for those kind of things don't pass the sniff test pretty quickly. And if the military is losing their inventory, why do civilians have to take the hit? Right?
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying.
If only the military can be trusted with these things, and then we prove that the military can't be trusted with them because they lose them.
Yeah.
Come on.
Then they pop up on Broad Market in downtown Newark in the back of a Punisher van.
Again, these people are saying, no, we have no problem working with these regulatory bodies, so you have to pass through us. You can't go to anybody else. You have to pass through us. It allows them to corner the market again.
Going back to the qualification courses, for the lack of a better term, that's what I've seen them build as. I looked at one range's schedule, and it looks like they were banging them out an hour at a time, like an hour at a clip. So you're saying, yeah, you could blow 50 rounds in 30 seconds, and not 30 seconds, in 30 minutes. We've all been there, and it's sad to see your ammo go so fast. It's felt like a get rich, not get rich, it definitely felt like a setup kind of thing. And
yeah,
I even mentioned this to you before when we were at the range, that will they be some undercover bias of the dude that owns range X knows Councilman Y, so anything stamped with that range will get through faster, easier, without any delays or such. And would that be factored into the price? Like, yeah, it costs a little bit more,
right,
but we've got a high track record of getting our recommendations through, or, being that we endorse you, for lack of a better term. We endorse you because you took our class, so you're less likely to be delayed, even though you can't be denied, kind of thing.
There's two ways of looking at that. Are they greasing the wheels and, conducting business as usual the way it works in New Jersey? Right. Whether it's getting a permit of any type, or completing a construction job, or getting an election handled. We all know how things work in New Jersey, right? New Jersey wrote the book on corruption. Conversely, could it be beneficial that a range that's been longstanding and has been working with, let's say, law enforcement and sort of certified security officers and all those things, has a better track record, and that reputation works in your favor? Also entirely possible, right? And I'm certainly not going to point the finger at anybody and say one way or the other. I like to think that anybody I've dealt with has been above board, and no one I've dealt with, I would suspect of that sort of shady behavior. With that said,
there is something to be said about the old phrase of "it's not what you know, it's who you know." Case in point, when I went and bought my firearm, they saw your name on my phone when I was texting you for information, and they were like, "Oh, is that so and so?" I was like, "Yep." And then you could see all right, this guy's cool. He's in the know. He knows this guy. So,
the attitude changes. Yeah.
So I could see that coming across with. I could. Okay, let me play the white devil's advocate here for a sec.
Reputation rubs off, right?
Yeah, reputation rubs off. And is it shady to monetize it? Like, okay, an average course, let's just say an average course is $150. I'm going to add another $100 because I know the bagman will rubber stamp this application because you saw my range's logo on the recommendation or whatever the hell that they supposedly give you. Is it wrong to monetize that?
So part of me goes free market capitalism, charge whatever you want. And if people are willing to pay it, then that's the price you pay. However, there's also fair market value, right? And if the going rate is $100 an hour for firearms training and you're charging $500, not for training, just to run the qualification, which is 20 minutes, I kind of feel like you're being a shitbag. And there were people who popped up that were asking $500, $600, $700, $800, then disappeared just as quickly, right?
Okay.
I know good people who are doing it for a lot less than fair market value because they really believe in the mission and want to see as many people as possible get their carry permit.
Right.
And they're not going to let cost prevent a person from exercising their civil right. Because this is the other thing. Do you have to pay someone to teach you how to vote?
Really
do you have to pay someone to certify you that it's okay to vote? Do I need to pay you for a qualification for a spelling bee before I'm allowed to exercise freedom of speech?
No, you do not.
And if I did, those things would be immediately called out as being fucked up.
Oh, you're right. And when you're right, you're right.
So it's this interesting balance, right? My time as an instructor, as someone certifying you, because we feel this is a part of the process right now. And this is the other thing. The law says it explains everything in the sense of what law enforcement has to do to qualify. It explains everything for retired law enforcement or civilian equivalent. Well, no one has actually enumerated what a civilian equivalent is yet. So we're all kind of guessing. And what most people are using is the law enforcement qualification. Some places are using their own qualification. And until we start seeing approvals or denials at this stage of the game, we really don't know which way it's going to go. And it may come down to the individual opinion of the judge that gets your application. All we know for sure right now is they can't deny it based on justifiable need. Justifiable need is gone.
Now we're basically,
You know, we're using all these law enforcement standards that you have to have an 80% or better to pass, that it's a 50 round qualification from 25, 15, 10, 5, and 1 yard. All these things that go into it, you know, and some places are modifying them, right? The HCQ2 that we did was supposed to be done at different stages, from behind cover, off a barricade, standing, kneeling, weak hand only, strong hand only. You know, there were a lot of different layers there. Some places aren't utilizing all those layers. Some places are just making you shoot out to 25 yards and shooting 10 yards or 10 rounds at 5 different distances and calling that good. And they're signing off on it. The strange thing is there isn't necessarily a standard for this either. So for someone to come out and say, there's no standard except my standard, and you're not going to get it without me.
do you think Rangers are trying to be the one to set the standard? So the added price is to help grease the wheels, to like give them the favor within the bureaucracy. Like, yeah, Range X has these guys ducking and dodging and this and this on, you know, the front door. And then in the back door, they're like, yeah, this guy just hit me off with $3,000 because he had 5 guys come through in a week and he steered them in my direction. There's a lot of talk about the privatized prison system with the police sending people to the judge who sends people to his buddy in the prison system and all that stuff. Are we seeing a strong possibility of a similar thread going through, but with ranges and I guess you said judges, so it's an actual judge that has to approve it, or like we're calling them judge because it's what they're doing?
Well, no. It's an actual judge. So it's going to go to your police chief, and then it's going to go to your municipal judge, from what I understand. Okay. And those people have to sign off on it. So if your police chief gets your paperwork and says, "Yep, I'm sending it to the judge," then the judge can. It's kind of like getting a bill passed. It goes through all these layers where people get to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and they can either kill it where it is or advance it to the next person for approval. My understanding is that a judge has to sign off on it, and then you get it. What I don't think is happening yet, I don't think this has become a big, fast-moving machine where I don't know that there's kickbacks involved yet, right? So what you're talking about is deep corruption with the prison system, and we've seen that with child welfare too, where a kid gets in trouble and gets sent to a youth facility that's run by the judge's brother-in-law.
Yeah.
What a coincidence. And then the brother-in-law gets to bill the state $80,000 for the 6 months that kid is there and receives $3,000 worth of food. Right? Mm-hmm. And there's very much a for-profit system there, and there's very much nepotism. I don't know if that's involved in this yet. Again, being that we're talking about New Jersey, they wrote the book on corruption. I don't think it'll be long before someone figures that out. Do I expect at some point in the next few years to hear that some judge was paid by some political group to deny permits? Would not shock me. Would not shock me.
Very true, yeah.
Right. I could very much see Bloomberg or Mom's Demand or Everytown or one of those organizations trying to influence decisions that are made at that level. Is there the potential for a stack of applications to go to a police chief or a judge with a check attached to it or an envelope full of cash attached to it from the certifying body, the range, the instructor, whoever?
I'm looking for Coach Hauser.
That's me.
A little something from your friends at the Bada Bing Club. Brand new, surround sound, HD TV compatible.
Well, tell them thanks, but
Hey, this fucker's getting heavy here.
if this is about Rhode Island, you can tell your friends it's a done deal. I already signed.
I don't know what it's about, but the TV stays here.
I don't think that's going on now. I'm not claiming that. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I'm not accusing anyone, just to be clear.
So
is it within the realm of possibility? Sure. There you go.
So to possibly say that there could be a line between two corrupted parties is totally true and hypothetical, my brother. The issue that we're really facing is that there's no endpoint just yet. So there could be many points on this thread on the board, but we haven't found out the end, the uber, the end of it all. That's what we need to figure out with this. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So
it could be a conspiracy.
That's right, my brother. You are Metamucil, man. Let me tell you. So what other kind of gatekeeping can there be other than the two we've discussed so far?
Let's say a young lady goes into a gun shop and the old guy behind the counter insists on selling her a small, pink, light revolver because it's easy to shoot.
Yeah.
How about letting her pick her own damn gun?
I think most ranges I've been to have had female on staff, probably to prevent that from happening.
Correct. What's funny to me is I was at a gun shop recently and I watched a female gun store clerk and self-proclaimed instructor do the same shit.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
It just is what it is. For whatever reason, some people get stuck on certain things. But yeah, the gun shop employee can certainly be a gatekeeper to those things. If they're more interested, again, in making a particular sale. I experienced that buying my first gun. I knew what I wanted, and the clerk told me, no, you don't want that. You want this. And I went, no, that's absolutely not what I want. But I was all of 18, and he persuaded me to buy that gun. So whatever. It wasn't until a few years later that I got the actual model I wanted. That goes on quite frequently. And with the current permitting system for handguns in New Jersey, boy, ain't that about a bitch if somebody sells you the quote unquote wrong gun and now you have to go through that whole process over again and wait another month.
I saw,
and you can't just,
in the news that I think it was California is giving the gun shop owners discretion to refuse sales of firearms. I think it was California. So that's the epitome of gatekeeping right there, by literally putting it in the merchant's hands. I can't really see a merchant turning away sales, but anything is possible nowadays.
Well, no, a merchant has always had that right? So straw purchases have always been a problem. If a felon comes in and let's say man and a woman comes in and the man is asking all the questions and the man wants to handle the firearms and the man has his opinions on what gun they're going to get. And then when it's time to fill out the paperwork, the young lady that's with him fills out the paperwork in her name and all this stuff and never once asked the question, touched the gun, looked at anything, gave a shit about anything. It's very clearly a straw purchase going on. He may or may not be a prohibited person, right? We can, as educated individuals, take a look at secondary information that may give us a clue. If he looks like he's specifically representing a particular group of young men who collectively have identifying markings and are incorporated for the purposes of committing crimes, he may be affiliated with a gang. And could thereby be a felon who is a prohibited person and is using this young lady to purchase firearms on his behalf, which is a straw purchase and a crime. Could the clerk at that point go, I'm not processing this for you? Yeah, absolutely. Happened to a friend of mine.
Oh, wow. Okay. Friend was the clerk?
No, the friend was the purchaser. Oh. He went in to buy a firearm. He and his wife, no criminal history, nothing concerning. And his background check came back negative. They were not going to let him purchase the firearm because of something. They didn't tell him what, because you don't get all that information. So what happens then is you get a letter in the mail and you have to contact the law enforcement agency and hire a lawyer and all that stuff. And he ended up getting it resolved. It was basically he had an issue as an adolescent on the mental health side. Oh. And it was resolved, but it was flagged in the system and prevented him from buying the firearm. Anyway, so at the time of purchase, he was denied. And his wife says, well, no problem, I'll buy it. And the clerk went, no, I'm not comfortable with that.
Huh. Okay.
and denied her the opportunity to purchase that handgun because he felt it would be a straw purchase for her husband.
I got this story from a two-way advocate on YouTube, and the way it was portrayed as if this was a new thing. I didn't think that was a new, I should say, I didn't think that had been happening before, that they had the ability to deny in that capacity.
Yeah. You're not required to sell anything to anyone,
Right.
which is why, a couple of years ago, there was a big argument over whether or not you had to bake a cake. You have a right to refuse service, right? Especially if you post that sign. What I think is going on in California, knowing the little bit I know about their governor, is he's probably putting onus on the store clerk that there'll be penalties if you don't interfere in the purchase of the firearm. That if you sell the firearm and it's used in the commission of a crime, now we can go back to you and say, well, you should have done something to prevent this. Kind of like the bartender is supposed to cut you off at some point.
Yeah.
And tell you can't have any more to drink.
Telephone. Flaming Mouse.
Yes, I'm looking for a friend of mine. Last name Jazz, first name Hugh.
Hold on, I'll check. Hugh Jazz. No, somebody check the men's room for a Hugh Jazz.
So I think that's the model they're following. Is that gatekeeping? Possibly. Is that possibly justified? Possibly.
I can see
there's a couple of different ways to look at that one. Sure.
Especially if you're possibly liable, and maybe even not liable, with the fact that they could drag you in to the court system,
right,
and you have to now pay to defend yourself, and that's
when it comes to firearms, the process is the penalty. Win, lose, or draw, it doesn't matter. Just having to go through that hell is going to be such a detriment to your existence. You're probably going to lose your job. You're probably going to lose whatever livelihood you have. It's going to cost you a fortune that you may or may not have going into it. Yeah, and it's a whole rigmarole. And the media can get hold of it and turn it into a circus on that front as well.
Which will destroy your business in 2 seconds anyway.
Right. You get canceled or the court of public opinion, whatever term we're using these days. Yeah.
Shit.
So there's a, but it's and the problem is there's a lot of nuance there that no one wants to address either, right? I could make the argument, yeah, if you're preventing a straw purchase for what appears to be a criminal, yeah, that's a problem. But if you're just an old white racist and you think any black person that comes in to buy a firearm is a criminal and you're just going to deny them patently, well, now you're an asshole. And now you're basically reinstating Jim Crow laws, and that's bullshit too.
And there's no way to fight that in court because you can't prove somebody's racist if they're not out spewing it on Facebook or social media. As a customer, you have no grounds for not revenge, but to get what you want.
Recourse.
There you go. Thank you for the proper word.
Unless you saw, unless you've got some evidence where you can say, look, this guy is not selling to and again, where are you located? Are you running a gun shop in Camden and not selling to black people? Like that would be weird.
You're not paying your rent,
right? That would be weird. Yeah. So there's any number of things that again kind of come into play with these hypothetical situations. I think that's why, in my mind, every step that gets in the way of someone exercising their right is gatekeeping and problematic because of those nuances, right? Because of the potential for abuses.
Yeah.
To me, we should go back to pre-63 firearms. No firearm needs a serial number on it, and they should be sold in the hardware store. And if you have cash, you can carry it out. Because if you're such a danger to society that I can't trust you with a firearm, why are you allowed to roam the streets without a chaperone? And the bottom line is every one of these regulatory pieces that's put in place, these gatekeeping measures, just ends up violating someone that it shouldn't, right? It always casts too wide a net and causes problems for people that should not be affected by it. So,
yeah,
to me, it's unacceptable.
What is acceptable, though, is our sponsor for this episode. Who you got?
Mission First Tactical from right here in Horsham, Pennsylvania. They manufacture parts and accessories. Some of my favorite magazines for the AR-15 and AR pattern rifle, 5.56 and 300 blackout compatible. These magazines are my absolute favorite. They are the Extreme Duty magazines. And if you go to missionfirsttactical.com, use coupon code BlackBag, you will get 10% off your order site-wide.
And they make dope backpacks that I use because they're awesome.
Yeah.
I've actually been complimented quite a few times about the backpack from people at work sites and stuff. Yeah.
Nice.
Quality.
Yeah, the soft goods are new. They're just about a year into that process, and they're looking at bringing more into that market. They've got a really great line of holsters. So, yeah, check them out. There's a ton of good stuff. I have to place an order in the next couple of days myself.